What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. From Mtg, we like magic, and we got some Thursday GRN spoilers for you, and there's a lot of standard playable stuff in here, at least from what I can tell. So I want to go ahead and jump into it here because we got a lot to cover. But as usual, just a general reminder to like the video, share the video, subscribe if you haven't done that to make sure you get all the spoilers after this. And with that said, I think we can go ahead and move into it. Now, the first card we're covering today is Invert. Now, Invert costs 1 blue or red mana. It's an instant, and you may switch the power and toughness of each of up to 2 target creatures. Now, Invent is 6 mana. It's 4, a blue, and a red for an instant. Search your library for an instant and or a sorcery card, reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle. Now, Invert looks like one of the weaker, first halves of these split cards that we've seen so far, but could totally be wrong. There's probably some really nasty stuff you could do, especially if you use this as a combat trick, or maybe you could protect a low toughness creature from Goblin Chainwhirlers ETB. There are things that can be done, and that first half is really all utility if you choose to use it. But the second half is what I really like about this. It does cost 6 mana, but it's instant speed, so it's entirely possible that a control deck would want to play this at the end of their opponent's turn and go ahead and stock their hand with cool stuff. But we got to move on so we can talk about Lava Coil. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a sorcery. Lava Coil deals 4 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Where you been, buddy? It would have been nice to have this against Hazoret, Rekindling Phoenix, but at least Phoenix is still in the format, so this is a pretty relevant looking piece of cardboard. Also, everyone, myself included, who has been saying oh, Chandra and Glorybringer leave the format, so 4 toughness creatures looking pretty good. We were all wrong. It turns out, everyone that was oh, we fit into play Shalai, boy. No, we were all pretty wrong about that. Now Red has a very strong way of taking out, 4 toughness threats at just 2 mana. It does kind of suck, the card is sorcery speed, but that's really not that much of a drawback when you get to take care of things like Rekindling Phoenix. Now up next is Gouri Raiders. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 0/0 elf warrior with haste, and it has undergrowth. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your graveyard. I've been saying this with a few cards already this season, but if there's a deck that can just flip its library over into its graveyard somehow, then this card actually seems like a pretty interesting finisher. If only you can give it trample somehow, maybe it could actually work. But here's the thing, we actually will talk about a card later on today. It may actually be the last card we cover, because it's getting a lot of hype. That kind of does allow you to flip your library over into your graveyard. So I wouldn't count this card out from being important, but I really, really doubt it. I just want to pull off some weird shenanigans with it. But check out Night Veil Predator right here. This is 2 blue and 2 black for a 3/3 vampire with flying, death touch, and hexproof. Now, this does appear to be a cycle, the cards with this specific casting cost in each guild. And of all of them that we've seen so far, this looks like the best one. There does appear to have been an attempt at some power parity among this cycle, but honestly, to me, this looks like easily the best so far. And again, I don't hate Wizards as much for printing this card as some people do. I've seen a lot of hate about this card, why do you do this to us, Wizards? Well, haven't you learned? But honestly, I think that there's enough checks and balances for this card in the format, especially in the form of just other flying creatures that are heavily played, that it's actually not that big of a deal, but it's still a really solid creature. That's hard to deny. But check out Conclave Guild Mage right here. This is 2 mana, a green and a white for a 2/2 elf cleric with green, tap, creatures you control gain trample until end of turn, or 5 and a white, tap, create a 2/2 green and white elf knight creature token with vigilance. I really like the balance they seem to have struck between the guild mages and how good they all look for limited play. This one too, again, bears are good in limited. It's a decent body. Nothing wrong with that. It's a mana sink. You want that in limited. Guild mages have always been mostly those 2 things, but I especially like the abilities this time around. Way overcosted for constructor, or at least the second ability is. I could see a world where you actually might want that first ability in constructed, but in limited, if you have a board full of big guys, then this allows you to get through with trample and sometimes just win the game sort of off that first ability for a really low amount of mana. And secondly, if you've got enough mana to pump into it and you're in a board stall that the first ability can't win, then you can just, go wide. So I really like the way this card functions depending on how your board looks. If your board is wide, or if you want to make your board wide, then you can do that if you have enough mana and turns, which you should at the pre-release and sealed. Hey, buddy, I love you too. If you have a big board instead, then the first ability is especially relevant. So I like a lot about this guild mage too. I like what they've done this time around. But let's take a look at Sentour Mediator right here. I apologize for the bad image. It's all we have so far. It's 1, a green, and a white for a 3/3 Centaur, and when it enters the battlefield, each player gains 4 life. So it's kind of a take on Centaur Healer, except that it gives you more life, while also giving your opponent the life, which could be okay. You know, if you're playing a life gain deck that gets like triggers off of life gain or something, then the life gain will definitely mean more to you than your opponent. And if you're just playing, you know, Selesnya or Abzan or whatever, mid-range, any mid-range deck that includes green and white, then this could be a really good tool against aggro decks. Yeah, it gains them the life, but you don't care. You know, you get to stabilize and not die, and eventually they'll run out of gas, whereas you'll just keep casting bigger and bigger stuff. So again, you won't care that they gain the life, but you need it at the time. But let's check out Price of Fame. This is 4 mana, 3 and a black for an instant. This spell costs 2 less to cast if it targets a legendary creature. Destroy target creature, and then Surveil 2. Seems caliente to me, man. Like, this is sort of, you know, a foil to cast down. You know, if you have a couple of cast downs in your deck, maybe you have a couple copies of this card as well, so that for 2 mana you can destroy pretty much any creature. And I like that idea, but people are really bypassing the Surveil 2 on this, and I think that the Surveil makes it worth casting for 4 mana on just a regular, quote, regular creature. So I actually don't mind this card at all. I could see a control deck playing a copy or 2 of this, you know, again, especially maybe in sideboards. It all depends on if people start doing really funky stuff with Dominaria Legends or Legends from this set, because we'll cover, you know, at least one later on that I think is probably going to see a good amount of standard play. So this could be relevant in a few different ways. Again, I think that the opportunity cost is relatively low on this. Yeah, the absolute best way you can cast it is on a legendary creature, but even if you're casting it on a regular creature, that's usually fine, because Surveil 2 is so good. But here's League Guildmage, the Izzet Guildmage this time around. It's a blue and a red for a 2/2 human wizard. You can pay 3 and a blue and tap it to draw a card. Or you can pay X and a red and tap it to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control with converted mana cost X. You may choose new targets for the copy. This too just looks crazy and limited to me, you know? Bear trades with things early, gets some damage in early, whatever. A body is always relevant in limited. The mana sink is decent because drawing a card in sealed is very good. Very, very good. That you basically get to draw an extra card, keep looking for the bomb that you either drafted or got in your packs. So all of that seems good. Plus the second ability is better than it looks, because some of the most important cards in sealed or limited period draft for that matter are going to be removal spells. So being able to copy removal spells is also really, really good. Yet another guild mage that I think they've struck the perfect balance on. But while we're talking about Guildmage, might as well finish up with Legion Guildmage. This is a red and a white for a 2/2 human wizard, and you can pay 5 and a red and tap it to have it deal 5 damage to each opponent, or you can pay 2 and a white and tap it to tap another target creature. Again, I just really like what they've done this time. 6 mana and tap is an awful lot, but it's a clock. You know, it's a 4-turn clock from their starting life total. So, you know, this is the only one of the only guild mages that can just straight up end the game by itself. I think it actually is the only one. So that's really, really relevant in and of itself. But it can also stall the opponent out, you know, keep them from attacking, or let you get more of your guys through. Again, just the guild mages look really solid for limited this time around. More than solid, actually. But let's check out Mission Briefing. This is a card to get excited about. It's just 2 blue mana for an instant, Surveil 2, then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Okay, I really like this card. You know, it's not a great replacement for Torrential Gearhulk because it's not a 5/6. It's not a win condition as well as a Snapcaster, but it is sort of the standard playable Snapcaster with no body, and that's okay. A disembodied Snapcaster. And that might be okay for our control decks. You know, I liked Flood of Recollection, so you know, I'm bound to like this card. Instant speed makes all of the difference in the world, and the Surveil is actually really good, whether or not you're recasting something you're surveilled into your graveyard. I would say 99% of the time you'll be casting this when you have a specific target in your graveyard in mind. Whether you're, you know, recasting a card advantage spell, or maybe your opponent has a spell on the stack and you want to recast a counter spell from your graveyard. This can do that for you too. Maybe a removal spell at the end of your opponent's turn. There's just so many ways to use an effect like this. It really stretches all of your spells. It's like playing 8 copies of Vraska's Contempt or Assassin's Trophy. Just the card is ridiculous and will probably end up seeing a fair amount of play. But now let's look at Thought-Bound Phantasm. This is getting a lot of press today. This is just 1 blue mana for a 2/2 spirit with Defender. Whenever you surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on Phantasm. As long as Phantasm has 3 or more +1 counters on it, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. Again, Wizards has just been slapping Surveil on a bunch of stuff. The last spell we looked at had Surveil and looks really relevant. We looked at a removal spell with Surveil. Again, the last card we'll look at today is a very relevant Surveil piece that can make this huge very, very quickly. So I like a lot about this. We've got Sinister Sabotage too, Thought Erasure. There's a ton of, cards that are decent in and of themselves that have incidental Surveil on them. That'll go really, really well with this. And I guess if you wanted to turbo Surveil, they've printed some stuff that can easily let you do that too. So this card just looks freaking bonkers in a lot of ways. It should get those counters relatively easily, and if it doesn't get the counters, it's still a good early game play. It's a very bad late game play, all things considered, but I still think that it looks strong enough in the early game, and it scales so good if you get it down relatively early that it may actually end up seeing some standard play. Now in Limited, if you're drafting up the Dimir deck and you just got Surveil after Surveil after Surveil, I think you play this no matter what, and you play as many copies as you get. But I really think this could transcend into real competitive standard play and be a very serious card, just because, again, but a lot of Surveil cards are just good cards that also just have Surveil slapped onto them with like no extra mana cost or anything. So I really like what this card looks like it could do in Standard. But up next, here's Glow Spore Shaman. It's 2 mana, a black and a green for a 3/1 elf shaman. And when it enters the battlefield, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. You may put a land card from your graveyard on top of your library. So it's a turn 2 Stitcher Supplier. Like, you can go turn 1 Stitcher Supplier, turn 2 this, and suddenly you've got a buttload of cards in your graveyard, and if your Stitcher Supplier dies, you'll have an even bigger buttload of cards in your graveyard. Imagine that. Like, you could have 9 cards in your graveyard by turn 2. That's insane. Like, this is crazy. I've been wanting a piece exactly like this. Like, I've been brewing up Golgari and Abzan and Sultai decks for the last few days. And we needed a good, black or green, or in this case, green-black, 2-drop, specifically that puts cards into our graveyard. But this can also make sure that you get that 3rd or 4th or even 5th land drop that you need, depending on what's already in your hand. So that's actually really relevant. Like, I've seen people just straight up say that this makes you skip your next draw step. Not at all. Not at all. You could have a handful of gas and no lands, and you really need that 3rd or 4th land drop. This can help you get there. So I like this card. I think it's going to see all of the play in the world and be a 4 of in just about every Golgari deck. Actually, one more thing. I was just going to move on, but it's at least got a decent power for its mana cost. If you have to attack with this thing, sometimes it can get in 3 or 6 damage. So that's not bad, but it also has just the 1 toughness, which people have been lamenting, but honestly, I kind of like it in a sly way. We talk about 1 toughness creatures being bad against Goblin Chainwhirler, but I think that Undergrowth might flip that a little bit. We'll lose Stitcher Supplier and this to a Goblin Chainwhirler, which usually seems really bad because we just got 2 for 1, really 3 for 1 on that exchange. But with Undergrowth, it looks like it can transition the ability itself. Looks like it allows you to transition really well into the mid and late game and just really, outclass your opponent with your crazy huge mid-range stuff. And so you might not care about losing a couple of creatures in the early game to a Chainwhirler ETB. You might even welcome it, depending on what you can do on turn 3, 4, and 5 with those creatures in your graveyard. So I just wanted to point that out. But up next is Lazav the Multifarious, the Professor's preview card this season. It's a black and a blue for a 1/3 legendary shapeshifter, and when it enters the battlefield, you surveil 1. You can pay X and have Lazav become a copy of target creature in your graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name is Lazav, it's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has this ability. One of the funniest comments I've seen about this card so far is that it's a worst Isareth. It's a better Isareth in a lot of ways. I know Isareth gets you the creature back, which is just fine. Obviously, that's really, really good. But this is a lot trickier. It has cooler interactions. It only costs 2 mana instead of 3, which is actually a huge deal. You don't have to wait to get value off of it until it attacks. That's also an enormous deal in Standard. And, a 2 mana 1/3 is not the worst deal either for brickwalling some aggro decks. So I like a lot about this card in comparison with sort of sideways similar cards like Isareth. I think it's way better in a lot of ways. But that's not to say you couldn't just play both cards in the same deck. And just whenever your Asareth dies, you can copy it out of your graveyard with this. Or maybe if this dies, you can get it out of your graveyard with Asareth. They actually seem to work really, really well together. So there's that. So I like that. But this is yet another best friends for Stitcher's Supplier. It seems like Stitcher's Supplier is the best card in Guilds of Ravnica, hilariously. And yeah, I know it's not in guilds. That's the joke. But in any case, this goes really well with that, and any other cards that just throw stuff into your graveyard. And luckily, this throws a thing into your graveyard. Yet another card that just stapled Surveil to, But newsflash from editing dev. That's right, I'm breaking in to the video, you guys, because they've actually spoiled a few cards while I've been editing the video, and I just want to get these in because one of them is especially exciting. But first, we want to look at Okra Assassin, Fried Okra Assassin real quick. It's 3 mana, 1 a black and a green for a 1/1 Elf Assassin with Death Touch, and all creatures able to block it do so. So they kind of put Basilisk Lure all on one card. It's super old school nostalgia button combo for me, but I guess the difference is that this is only going to kill one creature that's blocking it and go down swinging, but it lets all your other creatures get through in combat. So this actually looks pretty good in limited. But there's also Affectionate Indrik, which is another good limited card. 6 mana for it's 5 and a green for a 4/4 beast, and when it ETBs, you may have it fight a creature you don't control. First of all, I really love the flavor here, especially with the flavor text. It seems like it's not actually fighting the other creature. It's just like running up to it like your dog does when you come in the house, like, I'm gonna get you. And jumps up on you, and it knocks you over a bridge, because that's apparently what's going on in the flavor text of this, and in the art for that matter. But the card itself is good, all flavor aside, and again, I love the flavor. The art is amazing. It's got, I don't know if you can see this, but it's got cats around its legs, and that's hilarious. So this card is great. Again, nowhere near the standard tables, but in limited, this is a great green creature, actually, that you're probably going to play in all of your sealed decks. But the whole reason I wanted to break in and talk about these cards is because Knight of Autumn is a card that exists now, and it's freaking nuts. This is 1 a green and a white for a 2/1 Dryad Knight, and when it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on Knight of Autumn, or destroy target artifact or enchantment, or you gain 4 life. 3 different options. It's like a charm on a body, which is crazy, and it's like a better Reclamation Sage, although not strictly better, because, it's 2 colors, but still, in most ways, it's a better Reclamation Sage, which is a card that's already played in sideboards in both standard and modern, for that matter. And honestly, you don't even have to play this in sideboard. This looks fine in the main deck, because it's never going to be dead. It's always going to have something to do. The play between 3 different options is insane. If it's got nothing better to do, it's just a relatively big dude, 4/3. If you don't do the other 2 things to it. And plus, it works with +1/+1 counter synergies, if you've got any of those going on. And obviously, just better Reclamation Sage is good. that enter the battlefield trigger you'll use a good amount, I would say. And then it's also just a strictly better Centaur Healer. I've already referenced Healer once in this video, and they just made a much better card in Knight of Autumn. Gaining 4 life is going to be really, really good against aggro decks. And again, it doesn't even have to be in the sideboard. It's fine against aggro if you use the last mode or the first mode. Because it'll brick wall some smaller creatures and trade with bigger creatures in aggro decks. So there's so many good things about this card. It's going to be really good in Collected Company and Modern, I would imagine. Because again, it's just always got something really good to do. And it's got a decent creature type for Standard. I'm not sure how relevant that is, but you got to at least bring it up. Knight is a nice creature type in Standard right now. But I just think this card is bound to see all the play. It's always got something really good to do. ETB triggers are good, and when you get 3 of them on a body to choose from, that strikes me as ridiculous, so expect it to see all the play. But we've hit the last card of the day. This is Doom Whisperer right here. It's 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 6/6 Nightmare Demon. Cool creature type again. It's got flying and trample, and you can pay 2 life to Surveil 2. And there's a reason this is the last card of the day, and I've already referenced it a bunch of times in this video because it obviously looks stupid, bonkers. There's a reason that we have Assassin's Trophy in this format. There's a reason we have Disdainful Stroke and some other stuff. There's a reason we have, Cast Down. This can hit Cast Down, or Cast Down can hit this as well. And that's actually going to be really relevant because this card has no real downside. 5 mana, 6/6 Flample is ridiculous. Those are stats all day. It's actually in some ways better stats than Lyra Dawnbringer, and can kill a Lyra Dawnbringer in combat for the same mana cost. So there's that. I guess Lyra will gain its controller 5 life, but whatever. This is still bigger than Lyra, which makes a huge difference. At only 5 mana, the stats are overblown enough to almost justify the card, but it's the pay 2 life Surveil too. That's the really crazy thing about this. I've been talking all season about wanting a card that just lets you go boop, with your library and just knock it over into your graveyard. And this card kind of allows you to do that, provided that you have enough life. Even if you don't have a whole lot of life, just 1 or 2 activations of this every single turn to make sure you fix your next draw step is good enough. That's fine. This will almost certainly flip that Search for Azcanta. If you haven't flipped it yet, this looks crazy in a Muldrotha shell, obviously. Just dump some of your library into your graveyard and just... you basically just drew all those cards because you have a Muldrotha out. That's just insane. So, that second ability is crazy, and I haven't even scratched the surface yet as far as how good that ability is. There are some really weird edge things you can do with this in multiple formats, but again, I usually stick to standard. I'm a standard guy. So, I will say that one thing I'm really excited for, and stick with me here, is Lich's Mastery with this card, because basically it's net 0. You pay the 2 life, you surveil 2, but when you take the 2 damage, when you pay the 2 life, you can remove 2 cards from your graveyard. So you're just surveilling for free until you get all the proper cards into your graveyard. I'm assuming in this situation you already have some cards in your graveyard to remove to Lich's Mastery, or maybe cards in your hand, permanents on the battlefield, whatever you need to do to set up the absolute perfect graveyard, because its ability is effectively free. Now, again, stick with me here. Let's say we add Desecrated Tomb to the mix. Now that would mean that every time we exile a creature from our graveyard with Lich's Mastery, that we get a bat, which means a couple of things. Technically, we can just get a bunch of bats and finish the game that way, or we can start sacrificing bats to Lich's Mastery, at which point, the pay 2 life surveil 2 is net positive, putting cards into our graveyard, which is also really important. So again, it's a weird combination of cards right there, and it ultimately looks kind of bad, but I at least want to try it out because it's a really powerful thing to be able to do if you can actually get those cards out. But even if you cut out Desecrated Tomb, just this being at, again, net 0 with Lich's Mastery is really, really cool. But with that, pretty sure that I am tapped out for this one. That's all the cards so far for today that we have to talk about. Mwah, Ziggy. He always wants kitty kisses. He's the sweetest little man. But anyway, like I said at the beginning of the video, just make sure that you like the video if you enjoyed the content. Share the video around, do all the stuff. Subscribe to the video if you haven't, or to the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. We're trying to get to 100,000. We're going to hit it really, really soon here, and you want to make sure you get the spoilers anyway. So do that. Also, check out my sponsors over at TCG Player. They have really very competitive prices on sealed booster boxes of Guilds of Ravnica right now. I think it's $92, $93, free shipping from a lot of vendors on TCG Player for a booster box of this set when it comes out, and that is a good deal. So you might want to hop over there. Plus, they already have pre-orders on a ton of these singles. And even if you're not going to, buy any of these singles on pre-order, it's still an interesting way to get a price guide for this set so far. Kind of a barometer for where the prices are. So click the first link in the description to go down there to their site and check out all the Guilds of Ravnica product. And of course, I got to pimp the Patreon, because if you want to throw me $1 a month, it would be welcome and it would really help out a lot. And I'll give you something for it. I'll let you know what videos are coming out the day before they come out, or as quickly as possible. I'll let you know when spoilers are coming out and give you a little extra insight on those when I can. And you can get to vote on what decks you want to see first when Guilds of Ravnica standard becomes a thing. So all of that is kind of cool for $1 a month. $1 every 30 days isn't much, but it helps me more than you understand. I'll leave you a link in the description if you want to check it out. And with that, I am done for this one. So it's your turn. Go down there in the comments. Make sure that we get a dialogue going. Talk about these cards. This is one of the most important times to, leave comments so we can all, get as many ideas out there into the ether as we possibly can. So, make sure you comment. Let me know how you feel about all these. When was I wrong? When was I right? All that stuff. And what do you like? But aside from that, I'm pretty sure I'm done. God, you are just the cutest. You're a little view machine, buddy. You're just so sweet. But he's here for a reason. I mean, the buddy obviously loves me, but he is obviously also very good for the views. So there's that. But in any case, I'm pretty sure I'm done for this one. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.